It's been far too long since I made the counterpart to this video. Years ago I did my favorite Nintendo franchises list with a promise to make one for non-Nintendo franchises, and we're finally here! A list that has haunted me for quite a long time, and for better or worse, it's time to clear this out of the cobwebs in the back of my mind. So how does this one work? Well, I only have two rules. When I say non-Nintendo, I mean Nintendo doesn't own them. Duh, right? But if they've got permission, they can still pay a visit. And second, they need to have at least 2 entries to be on the list. No one-hit wonders allowed. Also, FYI, it doesn't matter if the series is still going or hasn't seen the light of day in decades. They still live in my heart. Are we all caught up? Good. Then without further ado, let's start it off!
10th place.
Believe it or not, the big reason this has been backburned so badly that it now needs an iron spine was finding the 10th place entry. I had always wanted to give it to the Tales of series, but since I've only played Symphonia, Dawn of the New World, Vesperia, and only the opening of Abyss, it felt disingenuous to put it on here when there were more games I hadn't played in the series. So I decided to open up auditions for many newcomers. If I had an interest in it, I was giving it a shot. It dragged on, and on, and on, and on to the power of 10! After thinking about it in a different light, I finally found my 10th place! A series that I enjoy on just about every level, except actually playing some of them.
Surprise!
If you've been watching my videos for years, you're probably going, "What? He's almost never talked about this!" For those I chat with on Discord, you're probably going, "Oh, this makes sense now." This is such a simple but brilliant concept. You're a night guard for a Chuck E. Cheese-like place, except the animatronics are actually haunted! For most of this series, you keep killer mascots from putting you in the last suit you'll ever wear. And in later installments, it's either keep your distance or go in the extreme opposite direction by getting up in their circuits and repairing them. Please don't shoot my face off. Your resources are limited, and the best way to survive is to be observant, informed, and have nerves of... Every game has its own rules, layouts, jump scares, story, and lore. But until an official timeline is revealed, I'm just going to theorize the story was done as a way for you to have your own interpretation of what's going on. There's enough of a narrative thread to follow, with some areas that have enough room for you to come up with your own idea of what really happened. The mystery of what was going on in the story is what got me interested in it since the second game, and the familiar settings and ideas are what helped keep me around. I do love speculation after all. That and rumors are always nice icebreakers. Speaking of settings, you can't deny the atmosphere of these games. The areas feel like you can actually set foot in them in real life. Not to mention how well it sets the mood for tension and sudden death, with the low lighting making it super easy for something to hide in, noises that chill your goosebumps, and the uncertainty of what's down the hallway. Any moment could be our last. See how real things just got there? Me? I enjoy watching others play it, others speculate about it, others theorize about it, seeing announcements for new games, the movie or possibly movies on the way, the characters and animatronics, and how Scott Cawthon went from bagging groceries to being a millionaire with nothing more than the budget of pocket lint, skills, and determination while using criticism to his advantage. God bless you, Scott, my fellow brother in Christ! But playing the games... well... There's a handful I can enjoy playing on my own, but every game in the franchise is at their best when you're streaming them, whether it's in a live stream or it's just in an online call. Oh my gosh, the phone is still ringing!
Doing great. Most people don't last this long.
Oh my god! Having others there is almost a necessity to get the most enjoyment out of them. And because I'm going to need that encouragement to keep me going. Some games I can handle just fine, but others just can't wait to kill me! Don't even get me started on the nights after 5. I'm okay with just clearing the regular work week, as even if I have the pattern down perfectly, and make no mistakes, I can easily be taken out by RNG. That kind of frustration I can do without. This series would have been much higher on my list, but I'm already far enough out of my comfort zone as it is, as horror isn't exactly one of my favorite genres. But I'll be looking forward to what comes next in the series. Unless it's another jump scare that wants me 6 feet under, I really hope I can do all I can to prevent that from happening. Hey, wait a minute! I was told you I was done with the dirt in this game! I've been lied to! Why is this happening?
9th place.
Now I'd like to go from 5 nights to 1 night. This is yet another strange entry point, and we're only on the second entry. Admittedly, I haven't played this franchise as much as I should for a list like this, but I never said this countdown was based on how much time I put into them. And while the gameplay is nice, there are other elements that really grab my attention. For the Night series, I adore the concept, music, colors, and charm. That's why I was so excited to see a spiritual successor, and why I was more heartbroken than most others with everything that happened with it. What idiot would buy this game? A stupid idiot. Back to the good franchise. I love the warm and inviting colors, the relaxing and uplifting music that complements the gameplay so well. In fact, I would say the music alone is why I keep thinking about this series in high spirits, and why it got a spot on here to begin with when I brainstormed this countdown all those years ago. Just have a listen for yourself. The Wii sequel, bless their hearts, they tried. The movement on some characters look absolutely stiff. The game is short and obviously padded with decent to missions. The on-foot levels are as enjoyable as when you're on foot in the original. The story is at its best when you don't talk about it, except for the cute moment at the end. And did I mention the on-foot levels lack anything special about them and make you want to do your chores and homework instead? But I do enjoy the parts that stick to the roots of the series, and the challenges that are passable fit well within the concept of flying on a fixed path. But I've been wearing these rose-tinted glasses a little too long. I need to take them off for a minute. The original is shorter than probably this video. The scoring system is best described as beating the clock, then teasing the clock. And the boss fights are either as simple as can be, once you know what to do, or who came up with this? But the rest of the game has you soar through imaginative stages that make you feel like there's still magic in the air. If you're looking for a game to just unwind from a stressful day or from some tense online matches, then I can't recommend this series enough. I do wish we could see more from it someday outside of cameos that gives it the creativity and deep thought it deserves. There's so much untapped potential here! We've seen other Sega properties get to breathe again, such as Monkey Ball, Panzer Dragoon, and even Samba de Amigo. If we see Bug return before Nights, I don't know if I'll laugh or cry. But at least the series is on their minds, so maybe one day those dreams will be a reality.
Eighth place.
Hello. I'm afraid of heights.
As far as I'm concerned, there is no other franchise, let alone a game, that makes me feel like a genius the way the Portal series does. I feel like I finally made up for this. Why can't I figure out the controls for Bridge Constructor? The first one kept it short and simple and focused primarily on the use of the portal gun. It was a fresh spin on the FPS by adding another P in there to make it a first-person puzzle-solving game. You're not blasting your foes to pixel dust, though there's a way you can still disintegrate some of them. You simply outwit them as your brain is the greatest weapon and they have no counter for it. It was a short but unbelievably addictive game that had virtually nothing else to be compared to. It was filled with puzzles, lore, mystery, and memes. How could you play this and not want more? And thankfully, the breakout of the Orange Box got a sequel that went big! The follow-up just flat out spoiled players with so much, it's hard to keep track of it. But you know darn well I'll try. The humor, even better than I could have hoped for. And the nominees for most likely to get a burst of laughter out of me in Portal 2 are Wheatley being a moron.
I found some bird eggs up here. Just dropped me to the door mechanism. Shut it right down. Bird!
GLaDOS's 5th-degree burns that sings the soul.
When you die, I'm going to laminate your skeleton and pose you in the lobby. That way future generations can learn from you how not to have your unfortunate bone structure.
And the defective turret sex gave up on life. And the winner is... Dave Johnson!
I'm the man who's gonna burn your house down with the lemon. I'm gonna get my engineers to invent a combustion uncombustible lemon that burns your house down!
How about some world building? In the first one, your world was just a building. The second one, what feels like 3 buildings in an underground site? Gels that affect your speed, jumps, and where to play with your reality-breaking holes. The lore, that's all over the place. I almost can't go a corner without something going, guess what I mean? The co-op that I need to revisit again. It's been over 10 years since I beat it. I need a refresher. Did I forget anything? You know I did! The first game only looks weak based on how much the sequel brought to the table, which is what good sequels do, so...
Success!
Man, I can't even imagine what they could add next, and for the longest time, I thought that might have been the reason they haven't done one. But knowing they actually have ideas and want to make another one? Valve, let me help you. This is the number 3, it comes after 2, mystery solved, you're welcome, now greenlight that baby!
I think we can put our differences behind us. For science. You monster.
7th place.
Originally, I wanted to have another rule for this list, but decided against it. That would be no licensed games. I wanted to focus on franchises that originated as video games, though thankfully the only licensed series that even came close was either the Star Wars Rogue Squadron or Battlefront series. So yeah, I'm quite glad I didn't need to make that rule canon and have to do some mental gymnastics explaining why Kingdom Hearts is the exception. Ever have those moments where you have a lot to talk about, but you have absolutely no idea of how to start? Me too, but I'll still give it a shot. Boy from Island, who was gifted a magic weapon by fate, became friends with iconic mascots while traveling from classic movie to classic movie while learning about the power of friendship and the heart. This feels like both the best and worst way to describe the basic setup for these games, but it's probably for the best that we leave it at that. If I were to explain who these 3 are, or why a rhythm game is canon, we'd be here for hours. All I really need is a magic sword to beat up classic Disney villains with, and I'm good.
Is it really a sword?
Go away, please. The first one focused on platforming, fetch quests, and levels that felt like unpleasant mazes. It was a bit rough around the edges, but man, it was ambitious and hard not to keep going. The second was more focused on the story, and if the cutscene ends, get ready for the
Mission-based objective!
Then another cutscene, rinse and repeat. The best part, besides the improved combat, was that the worlds weren't over after just one visit, and you'd return to most of them for something new and exciting to happen. And 3 had a focus on exploring the worlds around you with a combat system that went all over the place. It makes it kind of easy, but there's so much to play around with, I can't get bored! 3 gets too much hate for things I don't agree with.
What about the spin-offs?
Yeah, I'll just leave it at this. Appreciated the original GBA version more, easy to grind and get maxed out moves, and flow motion makes me ignore the major issues with it. Sleep go what now? If I go into any more detail, we'll have a ton of pacing issues with this video. As you level up, you get more abilities and chances to increase your combos, and I love seeing how many times I can smack them around before they even get a chance to move. Even better when you're airborne! They don't know what to do! People like to call this a flight simulator. I like to think, what's so good about the ground? You have other abilities such as using magic and summoning other characters, but you'll mostly keep it in reserve so you can use Karaga when you can, as trusting Donald to do it will make you go... And then we have the stuff that can range from mildly distracting to, please Lord, kill it with Faraga. Do I even need to bring up the gummy ship? Even at its best, I'd still rather skip them when I can. But thankfully, most of their time and effort went into 3 of the best things about this series. The combat, as already mentioned, the presentation, which tends to push the hardware and the system it's made for, along with the harmonious sensation for your ears, and respecting the source material. The characters and their worlds look and act like they should! You okay, Buzz? And it's always fun to discuss with other fans what worlds they can introduce for the next installment. I like to think we all have our yes please but will never happen choice. Let's face it, this series is a giant fan fiction gone wild and we're all for it. But if they bring in the live action remakes, I'm throwing this entry off the list.
Sounds fair.
Glad we can see eye to eye on that.
Sixth place.
This update is strictly classified. If you are watching this, you're fired.
The Ratchet & Clank series is a lucky one. They're basically the only ones from the PS2 platforming era that Sony thinks is important enough to keep around. I feel like I have survivor's guilt just by enjoying these games. But let's start with what this series is most known for. Your handy-dandy
Weapons of eradication!
dangerous, awesome, comical. They get stronger the more you use them, and you can combo some together that can turn you into an untouchable force of annihilation! Or just to have a good time. If you've played one, you have a favorite, and saying the Rhino is cheating. But I'll allow it. Then you fall into the trapping of maxing out a weapon to then never use it again so the others can be leveled up, and then not use those either. It's something only the seasoned players will understand. But that's not all you'll get. Along with your weapons that can blast foes to polygonal pieces, you also get gadgets that allow for platforming and solving puzzles. They give you a break from the excellent combat to try something else out. And then when you get back to decimating foes, you feel all warm inside. The platforming is there. It's by no means the weakest part of the games, but thinking of good examples only gives me so few. The puzzles, on the other hand, now that's another story with a happy ending. These can be quite well thought out, and can even be real brain teasers at times. Except for that one. That's an exercise in patience. And that's not all the tricks they have. They throw in everything they can, from space battles that can usually be thrilling to be in, to combat racing, to pirate dancing, to rail grinding. They know when and how to mix things up. Sure, not all of them are winners, but the effort is appreciated. Just like our robotic buddy. When Clank's not on your back, he's still got your back. I prefer the ones that actually have an aura of fun to them, such as the gravity-controlling mazes of Into the Nexus and time manipulation of Crack in Time. I love Pikmin, but this ain't it. And not to be outdone, the characters are the glue that holds everything together. Everyone is filled to the brim with personality, making them likable, relatable, and entertaining. Sure, Captain Quark and Nefarious can steal the spotlight, but the friendship between these two feels so unbelievably real.
Get lost before I flatten your robot into a hubcap. Touch him, and it's Plasma City!
Oh gosh, you didn't have to yell. Why did he have to yell?
And the interactions with the other well-defined characters is great motivation to keep playing.
Watch your mouth, Zero, before the mathematician subtracts your head from your shoulders!
When you have a mixture of wanting to upgrade your armory and to see the next cutscene, you've got a winner!
I was CEO of a respectable mutual fund and brokerage firm. Now I prey on the innocent for a living because the economy is in the shit. Destructipalooza!
Heck, even after beating the game, it's hard to stop playing because I just want to get every weapon and max them out. Challenge mode is such a great and addictive feature. There's so much to appreciate and enjoy that I keep asking myself, why isn't this higher? The simple reason, the other entries have seniority and a bigger place in my heart. Simple as that.
See you in the next reboot.
That's all for now.
5th place!
Nintendo has always been my go-to for systems and games, as they have the most amount of exclusive and attention-grabbing titles I want. I did have some of the other consoles, but a system that had Nintendo on it would get the most money out of me. I didn't start increasing my library until about a few years after I started my YouTube channel. Take, for example, the PlayStation 1. That thing didn't see an increase in games until I got a PS3 and downloaded some classic titles. Before that, I only had about 6 games for it. But there was one entry that stood out above all of them. While everyone else was playing Crash, or Metal Gear Solid, or Final Fantasy VII, or Vib Ribbon, I was having a wonderful time going ape. Sometimes it's a close call between Ratchet & Clank and Ape Escape for my favorite PlayStation franchise, but this one usually comes out on top, and if they made a 4th one or a remastered collection, I would buy a PS5 at that announcement! And the spin-offs don't count. I don't play this series for card battles. I feel sorry for those who haven't experienced it and love 3D platforming collectathons. They have no idea what they are missing out on. Heck, I feel like a lot of people don't know anything about this series. So let me share this fact with you all. In order to play the first one, you were required to have the DualShock controller. Controlling a character in 3D with a D-pad? How do you live like this? But this wasn't just a buy it or no play for you situation. It took full advantage of it and demonstrated how 2 analog sticks could be used effectively. This felt like a milestone in PlayStation's history, and to a degree, gaming history. So of course Sony doesn't care about it anymore. But I still do. As for the gameplay itself, the best way I can describe it is to think of Mario 64, but you need to collect a certain number of stars before clearing the level. Oh, and some of the stars are packing heat. You're gonna need some help with that, which brings us to a big staple of the series, the gadgets. You map them to the face buttons and use them with the second analog. Pushing in a direction on the right control stick will make that character swing in that direction in the game, but it's not limited to just that. You can rotate to move faster with the super hoop, look around with the monkey radar, drive a little RC car around to get through areas you couldn't normally get through. Tank controls that actually feel right for this, as does rowing a raft boat. It clicks when you use them, doesn't feel gimmicky, for most of them, and felt like a completely different experience compared to most other platformers, and that includes in this day and age. Catching those monkeys is best described as a simplistic form of the thrill of the hunt. You can't just walk up to them. Okay, some of them you can, but where's the fun in that? You gotta sneak up on them, you gotta outsmart them, you gotta solve puzzles, you gotta be ready for anything they can throw at you.
So wait, if the face buttons are gadgets and the second analog is for how they're used, how do you jump and move the camera?
Yeah, this is where it gets a little weird. The R1 button is for jumping, and the D-pad moves the camera. Admittedly, it's one of the weaker points of the series, because unless you have a crab grip on the controller, you'd have to stop and move the camera every time. Or center it with L1. It's as awkward as it is engaging. And if you want to see what they're like without the second analog and pressing X to jump, you can play the PSP remake. It makes me appreciate the awkward controls even more. The games have their charm, soundtracks that have me going like this, plenty of references, and strong moments to them. At one point it seemed like we were getting closer to a new entry. Now it feels like I have to give a eulogy. But that's when I'm ready to say goodbye to this series, and that's not happening anytime soon. For now, I'll keep hoping that one day, the apes will escape, and if they do, I'll be ready with a stun club, time net, and tears of joy in my eyes.
That's the spirit!
And now the only franchise on the list that's older than me. If you've known me long enough, you knew he was gonna show up sooner or later. But I need to clear up a few things. I'm basically split on this series. I first got into it with the release of Bomberman 64, and I greatly enjoyed the open exploration with bomb puzzles. Looking back on his older catalog would have been a repellent for me. Something about seeing the same background with limited movement just isn't that engaging to me. Earlier I said it's great when a series sticks close to its roots. That way it doesn't lose sight of what made it special. But when the roots can produce something like this, we should remove them with fire bombs! Admittedly, there's some fun when it gives you power-ups like remote control and being able to go through blocks. But if you die, it becomes way too devastating to continue. I just don't feel like breaking open all those blocks again just to find one good power-up. Same for having to find the exit, which could be the last one left. That's how I see it. When the game gives me more room to breathe, I can go a little wild. I can find secrets, collectibles, fun power-ups, and levels that actually have designs for them. The series is no stranger to experimenting either, and they can be better than you would expect for some of the spin-offs. Even though I'm not a fan of Hero, I'd much rather play that than the maze setups, even if it has a soundtrack that constantly punches my soul. I'll take my award for most hated opinion now. I even prefer the battle modes being in 3D too, as opposed to the traditional setup. I'll take my award for most unpopular opinion as well. But I can at least play in this style too, as long as I'm playing against real people. I'm honestly not even that good when it comes to this style of battle mode, but I'd like to think no one else is either, so it's fair game. The only real way to win is to get more power-ups so you don't end up on the short end of the fuse, and then set up your traps. Just don't get caught on your own, which happens more than I'd like to admit. This series pretty much originated the term multiplayer madness, and it will always have that going for it, as long as it has a multiplayer mode. Which is one of the reasons I enjoy this series, despite being so split on the two main styles it has. A few other reasons include the design of the character and the concept of solving your problems with bombs and being the hero. Bomberman is easy enough to draw without having to look at him, iconic enough to be noticed in a crowd of mascots, and still be expressive enough to always show what he's feeling. Too bad it can be hard to keep up with which Bomberman he is. The lore and setting of the franchise changes on a whim. It feels rare to actually get a sequel or a continuation outside of the ones with Super in their names. Canon in this series gets thrown out often and feels more rebooted than a Hollywood movie. See this character? I've lost track of how many times he's been reintroduced. Even the game based on the anime doesn't follow the canon of the anime, and if you have knowledge of both, you'll understand why. Speaking of which, I want to briefly mention the Jetters anime. For anyone who's watched the entire thing and didn't quit after the first 8 repetitive episodes or so, I'm sure we all have the same question. How did they learn to play the heartstrings so well? Sure, the way the climax ended was absolutely stupid and makes no sense no matter how you look at it, but that moment right before? Well, when I went to get the music from it that you're hearing now and read through the comments, I shed a few tears, and if you've seen it from beginning to end, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's well earned. Give me a moment. I guess that's another reason I look upon this series so favorably. It's one of the few to throw a couple of emotional punches at me that really hit hard. From the first time I felt angry over a betrayal in a game story, to an emotional music piece at the end of the second attack, to what I just brought up about the anime. It's stuff you wouldn't expect to see from something like this, but you welcome it all the same.
Third place!
Okay, I'm good. Now then, if you thought I was late getting better acquainted with the PlayStation family, then the Xbox felt like some long-lost relative from another plane of existence. Sure, I bought an original Xbox at a secondhand store over a decade ago, but I barely had time to play it. Then I got an Xbox One SAT in late 2019, and a Series X early 2022. The library after those two went from being counted on 2 hands to, I'm gonna need more hands. I still need to give Xbox franchises more of an investment of my time. I've been trying. I've been making an effort. But I kinda doubt they'll top their favorite of mine, which, yes, used to be owned by Nintendo. Who would have thought that the unlikely pair of a bear and a bird that lives in his backpack could be in some of the most amazing 3D platformers ever? But Rare had the magic touch back in the golden days, and when they were announced, I knew it was going to be something special, and they continue to be a golden standard of its genre to this very day. That's probably why they were the runners-up in the Smash ballot. Carefully handcrafted worlds filled with care, charm, whimsy, and imagination. Except you die in a fire. And that goes double for you! Yes, I wasn't happy with the game's announcement, but I held off on actually judging the game until I finally played it 2 years ago. While I have a number of criticisms with it, the realistic driving physics absolutely ruined the game for me, and when driving around in a vehicle-based game is more annoying than fun, you missed the point of entertainment! Back to the other two. Whatever environment they made the worlds take on, they would usually be in a player's top 3 of said environment. Island beaches, broken down theme parks, haunted mansions, underground mining, icy peaks, swamps with great rhythm, you name it! Rare knew the key to making the worlds fun and memorable. And no, I do not mean with controversial designs. If you know, you know. Not only were you meeting characters you never forget, for better and worse, but you would also see what kind of amazing new move you'd get. The high-flying beak bomb, the invincible Wonder Wing, the many uses a backpack has. The first one peaked at the 6th world, and Tooie had at least one new move in every level. I do prefer Kazooie more than Tooie, but learning about some of the exploits has given me more reasons to do some extra playthroughs of it. You might have noticed that I haven't talked about the GBA games yet. That's because I just got them around the time I was finishing up the video, so I don't have an opinion on them yet, but I'm hoping to talk about them in the future. For you younger folks out there, let me explain why this series felt so magical. This opening scene says it all. The characters feel so lively and animated, and portray emotions so smoothly. At that time, it felt like the kind of animation and charm you would find in an old Disney or Warner Brothers cartoon. It seemed as though video games were finally reaching that level of being more than just pixels and polygons on a screen. The characters had real personality that was being portrayed clearly. The story was nothing special, and that actually makes it special. The stakes are low, but the motivation is there. That motivation was just playing more of the game! Kazooie had an emphasis on charm, while Tooie focused more on written dialogue humor. Nothing wrong with that, just pointing it out. The sequel also coated itself with a darker tone and stakes that almost make it feel like you're in a different universe. And then this one had the nerve to tease a future game with our old moves and spent almost 15 years! I doubt they were talking about Smash. Current day Rare doesn't want to touch them. They must be chicken. But they will let someone else do it. They must be lazy. I know I'm not the only one who wants to see them return in a remake, remaster, or a new entry. Getting them in Smash was a great start. Now if only we can keep the momentum going. May we finally see a real Banjo-3 someday. Let's get real for a moment. Life is hard, but that's actually a good thing. The tougher the challenge is, the stronger we become. Giving up is for quitters, and you can't make it to the top by throwing in the towel. Some of our fondest memories can be when we finally overcome those obstacles we once thought to be impossible. I don't always need to play the hardest games on the market, but when they're well designed and fair, then I can't help but truly appreciate them. These can sometimes be the most immersive games out there, as we can relate to the characters and their struggles. Their victory is our victory. Their pain is our pain. We tell ourselves, one more try, but what we really need is someone to cheer us on, someone to shout, fight on, fight on, fight on! Super Fighting Robot! Of all the franchises on this list, Mega Man is the one I've known the longest. I was 5 when Mega Man 2 came out, and it was the only NES Mega Man game I had, which explains why I have a lot of fondness for it. I also remember one of my uncles getting me Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy as a Christmas gift, and I'm glad the nostalgia is protecting me from the ear-piercing soundtrack and this abomination. I beat the Game Boy version as a kid, but the NES version was just way too difficult for me back then. Didn't stop me from loving the level design, soundtrack, and power-ups. As I got older, I got to experience the other mainline games, and even a majority of the spin-offs. While they can be very similar to each other in some ways, I can find great enjoyment and value in all of them, with the original Blue Bomber standing at the top. The OG keeps its stuff simple, like its stories. If anyone other than Wily is behind it, I'll be shocked! And I don't even have to bring up how excellent the controls feel. Except for the first one, but he was still finding his footing. They speak for themselves and are always reliable. I should add them to my emergency contacts, cause I'm gonna need them for what the game has in store for me. But we'll have to decide who's first to go first. Trying to figure out, okay, who's gonna be the top dog, and who can I take out with a sneeze, is part of the fun, especially when you have the freedom to choose who you want to go after first. Some exceptions are there, but you still have a choice. The levels are difficult, but fair. They give you an idea of what to expect, and then when the real test shows up, you can't say they didn't prepare you for it. The cheap shots are few and far between. I pretty much have to cherry pick the examples of them. The platforming jumps can be so precise that this becomes a natural habit of players, and for good reason. If you lose a life in these games, that's on you, bro. Except maybe the time platforms, there can be an argument for them. Those that can't accept accountability and their own shortcomings will hate these games. A reminder, this is only my second favorite on the list. You can have these levels memorized, and they'll still present a challenge. Which is why I keep coming back to them again and again. After a while, you'll become a master at understanding how the levels are structured, the timing needed for them, and abusing iframes. You'll get really good at that, along with praying for an energy or life drop with every enemy you encounter. You'll do it without even realizing it. If you don't learn to respect these places, you'll be taught to respect them the hard way. Same goes for the bosses. If you don't learn to observe and study their behaviors, you'll become mega dust. There are bosses who follow a pattern to an unbelievably pathetic level, aka the ones you challenge first, and then there are those who I still need their weakness weapon to succeed, which is another great and iconic legacy of the series. Defeating a Robot Master allows you to take their power for yourself. It's like Highlander for Robot Masters. Admittedly, I tend to play a bit conservative when it comes to using those weapons, as they do require their own separate energy, and you're not sure if you're going to need them later or not. But once I get a good grasp for how useful they can be, the replays just got twice as good! Figuring out shortcuts, stopping hazards, finding secret paths, collecting out-of-range items, looking out for traps, and of course, the matchups against the bosses. The Robot Masters will brush off certain attacks, while others can absolutely humiliate them. It's a rock, paper, scissors mechanic. And speaking of rock, the music does exactly that. He's got to live up to his Japanese name, doesn't he? And I just adore the character. Mega Man's sense of justice is measured by my desire to see him win the day. But he can't do that until he's crushed Wily's castles, fortresses, hideouts, places to cry, whatever you want to call them. All of your skills will be put on full blast in these areas as you take on a gauntlet of hazardous and nefarious setups, each one more devious than the last. The bosses here won't give you any new powers. Get ready for rematches from your fallen foes, and good luck with anything involving the Yellow Devil. Wily also discovered the power of multiple phases. You'll really wish you could put him down for good. But if there's no Wily, then they can't make more Mega Man games. Can't fight for world peace if there's no Wily causing havoc. I mean, what else are they gonna do? Come up with a new villain? Pfft, yeah, right! But whenever he comes back, I'll be right there with you, Mega Buddy. Every step of the way. Every one of these franchises and more holds a special place in my heart. Each one brings something unique, memorable, and a level of joy just thinking about them. No amount of my time was ever wasted when I spent it with them. These will always be important to me. And now we've arrived at first place, and all the other entries just can't keep up. Heart, be strong. I have to reach down deep for this one. Let's start with when I first saw him. Sonic 2! I was captivated on the spot! The colors looked so bright, the characters just popped on screen and looked so cool! The speed was incredible, the music was mesmerizing, and the game was easy enough to understand, yet didn't hold any punches back when the time came to take off the training wheels. This was the first time I ever wanted to buy a console for just one game! And as a kid, that's not an easy task, especially with no allowance. But it made the moment of getting one so worth it. I grew up with the first two classics, rented 3 and CD, and after the Adventure series, I was always waiting to hear about the next installment. Those feelings would continue with me for the rest of the series as well. The incredible set pieces that will never be forgotten. The music that pumps me full of energy. I feel like I could run a whole marathon fueled by this alone. The colorful cast of characters and their abilities. It's about time they started giving them some attention again. And the exhilarating gameplay. You've got some good to amazing platforming. But we all know this series is about the rewarding speed you get for playing so well. When the levels amp up, you really feel a sensation that thrills your spirit and is one of the many reasons I keep replaying them. The zip-zany, roller-coaster-esque designs are great visuals for players to enjoy. When played to perfection, they can become a spectator sport. It's a natural feeling to want to memorize the level and see how fast you can clear it. That was one of the original ideas of the franchise after all, and while you can feel that way for just about any game, the natural speed this franchise has gives it that unfair advantage. Some games did it much better than others, and this series is no stranger to questionable decisions and quality issues. See these two? They're abysmal! But I don't hate them. Their development makes me take pity on them, especially Boom. Now these two, better not run into me in a dark alley. There have been some other, I'll just call them experiments and leave it at that for now. And I haven't even gotten to the spin-offs. I see a lot of them as guilty pleasures, 2 absolute classics, and the less said about some others, the better. Also, the soundtrack in Chronicles is so bad it sinks the entire game for me. But let's go back to the main focus of the series, the platformers. And with this series, you'll get a focus for both dimensions in the second and third. When it comes to 2D, there are multiple paths to take. Having so many options will allow the player to explore and experiment to find the fastest route possible. Or just to solve their curiosity. You'll normally try to stay on the highest path, as it's either the quickest or the best route to the goal. And staying up there is the real test of skill, along with finding out how to get up there in the first place. But of course, one of the best ways to experience the flat dimension is to successfully clear the bonus stages, collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds, gather 50 rings, and enjoy the fruits of your hard work. 3D, on the other hand, allows for more moves to be used, more areas to run around in, being able to see things ahead of you, and just more in general. I actually prefer my platformers in 3D, as it feels like I'm really playing in that world. But if you think I can't appreciate a 2D platformer, then you clearly don't know me, or haven't been paying attention. Sonic Team did merge the 2 dimensions, and to be honest, it started to overstay its welcome. They weren't changing it up that much, and the 2D portions clearly overpowered the 3D parts, which already felt watered down to begin with. I could also bring up his friends again, but without taking up too much time, let me give you at least one example of what I'd like to see. Tails using his gadgets and solving puzzles to get to the goal. I still see so much untapped potential in this series, and as long as the right team is involved, along with the right ideas and development behind it, we'll continue to get great installments. Mania and Frontiers are proof of that! Also the Chow Gardens. Please bring them back. And finally, there's the character Sonic himself. I've always looked up to his can-do, nothing will hold me back demeanor, while also never ignoring someone in trouble and going to great lengths for his friends. His confidence is contagious, and his design became the literal definition of cool in the 90s, and still maintains that to this day. Yeah, you can bet I used to pretend to be Sonic on the playground in elementary school. I mean, what kid didn't? So not only is this franchise my favorite non-Nintendo series, but he's also my favorite video game character as well, and I have no regrets in saying that. And that'll do for this long overdue list. And if you have a difference of opinion, I'd like to hear what your 10 favorite non-Nintendo franchises are. This franchise might go up and down and all around, but the ones that hit rock bottom make me appreciate the high points all the more.